Hey everyone, welcome to this exciting webinar presented by C3 Solutions. I'm your host, Dooner, and today we're going to be having a really interesting conversation about how continuous innovation plays an important role in the customer experience. Interesting to think about, isn't it? I think I'm going to learn something in this one too. We have an amazing panel of four gentlemen representing the globe here in FreightTech. Let's introduce you all to them. Neil, let's start with you. Introduce yourself to our lovely audience here.
Hi, everybody. My name is McEvoy. I am the VP of Customer Experience and Business Development at C3. I've been with C3 about 3 years, and I've done about 15 years in the UK parcel logistics industry before that.
Interesting. You'll have a great perspective to share here. How about you, Mathieu?
My name is Mathieu Matt Bernier. I'm with C3 as well, based in Montreal. So been with the company for 20 years as a senior business analyst and a key account manager. 20
years is pretty good. If you haven't seen change and innovation during that time, you probably would not have been there for 20 years. Jamie, how about yourself?
Yeah, g'day, Dooner. Hi, everybody. Jamie Dixon calling from Melbourne, Australia. Great to be here. I've actually been in the freight and logistics industry for 30 years. I've seen a huge amount of change in technology and bringing together customer experience. Great to be here. Thank you.
Wow. 3 decades strong. I'm sure you've seen it all and maybe then some. How about you, Mathieu?
Hey, everybody. Yeah, so I'm a senior consultant at TMX, do a range of work in DC design, TMS, transport management systems, and warehouse management systems. So I've been here 7 years, the young one of the bunch, and just enjoying some of the new tech and new products that we kind of come across these days.
Well, very cool. Well, when we talk about a topic like continuous innovation, right, and the customer experience, what we're really talking about is customer relationships. So before we put the cart before the horse, let's get into defining that, right? Let's define the relationship in FreightTech, right? How do they work? Should they be transactional and efficient? You know, we're thinking about this software, right? It should move quickly and there should be automation and it should move fast and break things. Or should they be collaborative? Let's start with you, Neil. What are your thoughts on relationships in FreightTech?
Well, I think they're essential. I think any successful freight tech company or logistics company will always have an idea of what's on their sort of near and future roadmap of where they want to go with their customers, with their products, with their services. But I think if you know, any supply chain relationships that you have with tech or suppliers in general, you need to both have an idea of where you're going. I think if one of you wants to take the lead, that can always work. But I think it happens somewhere in between. In between those two goals or those two ideas, you've got expertise on both sides. And that kind of middle point is often where the magic happens. You know, the innovation is often through, you know, something changes, something, you know, needs to be, challenge needs to be overcome. And I think between in freight tech, you've got guys that are very technically savvy, but by working more with logistic professionals and having the experience of, you know, things going, maybe not so well and having to change and, things like pandemics, growth in a particular area or another. I think that, you know, working together and collaborating can get you from, these small incremental changes that a business just does every day and every year. And I think you can go into the real sort of 10% plus improvement ratios because you're doing something fundamentally different, but with expertise on both sides. I think, you know, each individual side has its own idea, but together something really magic can happen and, you can start something really special that can evolve into a really, really cool future plan for both parties, I think.
Now, Jamie, you have 30 years of experience trying to strike that balance between transaction and relationships and how much, your customers guide the way it should go. How do you look at FreightTech relationships? And do you agree with what you just heard from Neil?
Yeah, look, I do agree with Neil. I think that collaboration is absolutely critical. I think working closely with your customers around what the FreightTech solution needs to look like is extremely important. As you say, having so much experience in the industry, I've seen, from an operational perspective, you really need to be engaging with the operational folks and also the other key stakeholders within your customer relationships including IT, including sales and marketing. But, in terms of the logistics folks and the freight folks, that operational lens is very, very important in order to get that great collaboration with your customers.
Interesting. So Jamie, Matthew, let me ask you this one then. How are the best customer relationships formed? And this might be a dynamic answer in and of itself because they might apply to who that customer is. But in general, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think the most important thing is listening first and foremost to what the client needs, what their situation is. Every client's somewhat different and may have a different circumstance. We just went through a process with a client of ours who was kind of very manual, very heavy on spreadsheet-like bookings, SharePoint-like bookings for inbound trucks. And they wanted a way to basically get away from the old-fashioned carriers calling them every day, carriers emailing them every day, the back and forths that comes with it, and allow the carriers to take their bookings into their own hands. But they also had a long list of other requirements which we wouldn't have necessarily known off the bat if we hadn't gone through the process with them and listened to all of what they require, because it's not just simply giving a carrier a portal and the problem's solved. There's a lot of other, particular needs and wants of the customer. And so I think, put simply, just listening will build a great relationship over time.
What we do well usually isn't what's going to cost us relationships. So let me actually flip this question onto you, Mathieu, and say, how are the best relationships ruined?
Well, I could come back to what Matthew said earlier and say, you stop listening or you don't listen. That would be the best way to ruin a relationship, because the strength of a relationship between the vendor and you will be to build during various phases. But if you just, go your merry way and stop listening, that'll probably erode and you'll probably lose that customer.
Neil, I saw you shaking your head a lot. Did you agree with what he had to say there?
Yeah, I think that if either side believe they have all the answers, then there's no need for the collaboration, and I guess these two entities would never meet up. So kind of to echo what Jamie and Matthew had said before me, and of course Mathieu, is that I think that listening is super important, but I think you need to do the digging, you need to do the hard work. You have to really go down to a level of what are you trying to achieve, what's the problems you're looking to overcome, and what's the most elegant or optimal way of doing that, and something that's sustainable when the vendor steps away. You can't give some, a tool or some kind of way of thinking and expect people to have this in an everyday and get, true success from it if you don't give the guys the means to carry on. And that goes both ways, that having a support function to make sure that you can keep that relationship a strong one. And I think honesty, you've got to be honest about what you want to achieve, how quickly you want to do it. And again, what are the absolute sort of fundamentals of your timescales. So I think those things are really key. I guess it sounds a bit cliched, but it's just like any relationship. You've got to have a two-way, open, transparent, and honest way of communicating and working together.
Yeah, I learned that lesson firsthand when I was in freight sales. And I remember my first year doing it. It didn't last long in this job, but I was constantly out there trying to sell what the company wanted me to sell, but not really thinking about the customers. So they want boxes Shanghai to US East Coast. That's what I'm selling, regardless of what the person across from me needs. But that taught me a really good lesson. And I've taken that when I started looking at other things. And sometimes you look at FreightTech and the way it's presented, and it's like, is this technology or is this direction the company's going in suit their company's needs the best? How much time and how important is it, Jamie, to understand the solution from the customer perspective versus our own? And what is your strategy for not getting caught up in sort of that internal castle thinking?
Oh, look, I think it's really important. I guess you've got to think about the customer, but you've also got to think about the customer's customer. So who are they delivering to? The consumer, the customer, whether it be, whether a retail environment, industrial environment, FMCG, whatever type of industry. Our customers have got to really think about their customers and what customer experience are they trying to generate? Are they trying to get a best-in-class service? Are they focused on cost? Are they focused on that trade-off between cost and service? Are they trying to optimize that experience? for the customer relative to what they're trying to achieve. So it gets back to that listening, it gets back to that collaboration. And then, I think Neil hit it on the head when he said it's got to have a long-term relationship. It's not a one-night stand here. It's really it's a marriage. So this is what we're trying to develop with our clients to get that best customer experience for them, but also for their customers.
It's interesting because I've heard several of you already say that it really comes down to listening and hearing what they're saying, but then that also comes down to the listener and their ability to interpret and to take in that information. Mathieu, let me ask you this. How important is supply chain know-how to this process of engineering solutions?
Yeah, I think it's the most important thing. I think any implementation that we've been involved in or otherwise heard of that doesn't involve the operations, the people on the warehouse floor, at the dock, or running the yard first and foremost is doomed to either be very difficult, fail entirely, or go down a path of not what the customer needed or wanted. So I think first and foremost, as long as we're clear on what the operation needs, what the process they would like in the future is, and what the challenges they're facing today are, and how we can resolve them with the tech, then I think we're in a good place. But if you go forward and just from an engineering or product development side without considering the operators and how somebody would actually use the software, then I think we end up on a fairly difficult place. I mean, the most common example that we'll come across is something, and this is minor, but I guess reflective of the whole situation, is in New Zealand we don't use seals, for example, and we don't use a lot of American terminology or process in freight. So the same thing applies to Australia. We don't typically use many seals or seal numbers, and there's a lot of solutions out there that force you to enter seals, so users are just entering through screens that are not relevant to them every single day, and that's the experience they get with a particular product. Not in all circumstances, and not with C3, for example, but it's something that we come across often. So I think both supply chain know-how and geography-specific requirements and operator requirements are really important.
Folks, we're going to get a little bit deeper into these discussions too. So if you have any questions, leave them in the Q&A. We'll be sure to answer them either live, or we'll have one of these experts here get that answer out to you. So don't be afraid of going in that comment box. Well, that makes me think, though, Neil, what I was just hearing there, right? When you are considering supply chain know-how and you are considering product development, he makes a great point, and that's that a lot of the changes, a lot of the needs that your customer has are not necessarily due to their immediate need. It's due to their other customers' immediate need, or some shipper's need, or a conflict they have with a factory or a port. That's the nature of supply chain. It's very dynamic. It extends beyond our own houses. How important is know-how within C3 for your team?
I think it's essential, and I think our ethos has always been to kind of keep our people sort of as happy and as fulfilled and as challenged as we want, because you get somebody in and they work with customers a long time, and before you know it, even if they work in a very technical department or role, they really get familiar with the world of logistics, supply chain, and the various different sort of kind of the language, the constraints, the challenges, the change of the year. We have peak periods in that are familiar, and periods of quiet time where you're focused on cost and improving procedures and stuff. So for me and for C3, I think we try to understand exactly how to best serve the customer with our people. And I think, to Jamie's point earlier, the customer's customer. I mean, often, I guess in logistics, you'll hear of the shipper and the shopper. So a lot of the time, the person who we're delivering to is the person who understands, what we're, our end user is the person that will notice a problem on our app before the kind of service desk that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So it's about making sure that both of those expectations are aligned, and that we put them at the heart of everything we do. So having a super cool piece of technology in freight tech is great, but if it's not usable by a guy who works in a gatehouse or a girl who works in a control tower, then you're not really serving the purpose that you're intending to do, which is to make things easier. over complexity often breeds problems. So we try to make things, the tech should be really cool and really innovative, but the user experience and the day-to-day lives of the end user are key. These are the guys and girls that are going to make sure that they give you the good feedback. So I think that's essential. Us having good knowledge of the users and of the sort of innovators within our customers, and making sure that we kind of align both things and both parties are happy, basically, I think.
Yeah, Mathieu, have you seen any of this like sort of innovation gone awry firsthand? I know I have in some of the product demos that I've seen of tech, and it's like, are they really considering the end user? This looks flashy, but it looks like it was built for investors.
Yeah, absolutely. We've worked at customers with other, I guess, where we needed to integrate with other systems from other vendors, and I guess a lack of flexibility in that case led to in missed opportunities to innovate, I guess, in a faster manner or within a standard project timeline. So yes, that definitely happened.
Interesting. So Mathieu, what do you think can make us inflexible in these environments, and how do we make for a more flexible environment?
Yeah, look, I think the most important thing with regard to flexibility is reasonably simple in technology. Just something like the ability to edit field names, something like the ability to change how a screen flows or presents. For example, not every customer would have the same process steps in the same order as others. I mean, if you take receiving at a guardhouse, for example, it's all fairly standard in terms of the physical process. The truck will arrive, the guard hut will check them in, they'll present themselves to the facility, they'll get unloaded, right? But within that, each client will have different requirements on the level of detail which they need questions asked, inductions checked, all of this sort of thing. And if the fields aren't flexible and the flow isn't flexible, it's really clunky for an end user to use the system. So I think in my mind, it's fairly simple. Just ultimate flexibility in terms of naming and in terms of flow of a product is fantastic when we're presented with something like that, as opposed to something that we can't adjust and need to force to work for us.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Neil, anything to add to what he just said there, and the sort of the natural inabilities inherent in supply chains that may stand in the way?
I think, again, without getting too dragged into I don't know, imperatives or ideas about things, but sure. I think one thing I'm really interested in is innovation itself and how we work with people. And there was a funny quote I heard, basically, if the candlestick maker just stuck to innovating incrementally, there would have never been a light bulb, right? So sometimes you have to really understand what are the serious goals and how the technology can really get you to that next level without just, painstakingly stepping from point A to B. Sometimes you can, jump quite far just from understanding exactly what the goals are of the business. And I think there are several goals. But like you said, there may be investor goals, there may be mid-management level goals, but effectively trying to align all those different expectations, all the the large sort of imperatives of the company, where the guys want to go, and truly understand, well, what elements of the FreightTech, what elements of our team and our, even if you guys as consultants, where can I add value? Who in my team can add that value? Who's got the knowledge base? Who has the experience? And then again, it sounds pretty corny, but in that sort of melting pot of ideas and those people, often you'll find something that might be completely new. And, that could even affect the roadmap of our product or another vendor's product, to say, okay, we need to go that way. And one thing that was massive during, the recent period was the idea of paperless. We thought paperless was a great idea because it was, saving, printing paper, and it's an old school thing to have lots of paperwork, sheets and everything having to get, printed and filed. Whereas it became a much more of a cleanliness and pandemic related thing of, we don't want paper, we don't want things. So often a new challenge or a new thing to overcome will change the direction or the idea behind a particular piece of innovation. And I think that kind of, having multiple different people from the business around during that decision-making process and consultants will give you a much more sort of global or objective view about, okay, not only what the problem is, but how do we get to the problem quicker and even exceed what we thought was a sort of good idea or a good sort of solution a year ago. And I think those conversations don't just need to, they're not just something that has to happen at the start of a project, but they should happen regularly. Again, I sound like a broken record here, but having constant contacts between your clients, consultants, vendors, those constant chats, they could be a coffee, might be a scheduled meeting when you look about numbers and KPIs, but those are key to understanding what's, the pulse of each of the sort of stakeholders and how to further things better eventually for the shopper. Not, it's the person at the end, they're the ones who really get the results. And let's face it, they're the ones that will put their dollar or pound or whatever, to the businesses that are flexible and do understand how to make their experience that bit better,
I love that paperless example too. It took until people thinking like paper would kill them to do anything about it. Yet, I still have drivers who are printing packets of like I just had wonders, like I had to print a 150-page packet just to get across the border from Mexico, like literally printing them, like finding printer ink and getting actual paper, not PDFs or an iPad or your phone or any of the things we have. It's amazing to think about. Jamie, on a design and innovation level, conceptually, why do you think supply chain is often so behind, or why do we hang on to things like paper for our dear lives?
Well, look, I think there's a number of things that it's a very traditional industry, the freight industry, the logistics industry, and folks apply logical thinking. And I mean, I remember, going to university in the 80s and we're talking about paperless back then. And then, why haven't we got to paperless now? And I think the age of digitization really now is starting to become upon us. But we're dealing in certain geographies, for example, Dooner, where there's compliance, there's legislation, there's requirements around proof of deliveries, there's requirements around entry and exit. We've seen from a cybersecurity perspective, the whole security issue, across supply chains is now a massive topic. So how do you digitalize your supply chain, but also make sure you're compliant, you're safe, you're sustainable? And if you're trying to put all those together, then, to some extent, there needs to be some traditional forms of thinking around logistics. And if that means paper, or if that means, having the right check-off points, or if that means having the right manifests in place to ensure that supply chain is working seamlessly, then that's really important. But as I said, I think the whole age of digitization really is upon us. And we've got to be innovative. I think Neil made a very good point with the pandemic. It's really been a light bulb moment for us in supply chain, whereby we've got to really be now much more proactive and really give that, control, visibility, and great customer experience. Supply chain has gone from the back page to the front page globally through the pandemic, and it's a massive opportunity for us that sit in the industry. And from a TMX consultancy perspective, we can play a role here to really make, supply chain is absolutely critical from all of these perspectives, because at the end of the day, when you go into the supermarket or the shop, you're expecting goods on the shelf or expecting to get a delivery onto your doorstep from an online perspective. And so you're really now expecting something much better in the whole logistics industry.
Those are all great points. And I think we're all seeing it right now. I mean, there was no greater event than the pandemic and the post-pandemic for showing just how dynamic innovation has to be, right? And the speed of innovation has to be. Mathieu, what's the biggest lesson you've taken away from the pandemic and post-pandemic? I mean, you look at retailers right now, and like right here in the US, the issues that they're dealing with inventory, right? And the bullwhip effect. I mean, the bullwhip effect has been lashing the supply chain for almost 3 years now.
Yeah, so we had to adapt through the pandemic and kind of updated or changed or adapted our methodology, and we were able to deliver projects and go through remote go lives during the whole that whole period, and it has changed the current methodology, even post-pandemic, where we can deliver, we can go for a hybrid form where we carry on with the customers based on we can deliver faster by doing remote or face-to-face, which is always the best option for me. But I guess the pandemic brought up to us, made us adapt to keep on delivering throughout various projects. Yeah.
Yeah, Neil, in a remote world, can we help? I mean, I know that we helped. I know that like data platforms like we have over at FreightWaves have helped, and I'm sure you've seen it firsthand. But do you have an example of that? Do you have an example of that remote world stepping in, Neil?
Yeah, I think so. I think one thing that, however big your organization is, and however, I mean, some companies are blessed with huge conference rooms and, you know, sites where they can get everybody together and have a meal and strategize over a pizza in an evening while the operation's going on. But I think one thing that I took away is that if you want to get a lot of people working in multiple streams at once, the kind of online world with really cool tools for tracking project milestones and making sure bits of work are shared, you know, even online training, the power of the kind of evolution of we're sat on here today. We're on a conferencing thing as we speak from multiple areas of the world, and it's in real time, and it feels like, and again, nothing will kind of replicate the shoulder-to-shoulder idea of delivering something in a room together. But what it can do is, in a very low-cost option, bring multiple experts from all around the globe. You know, I realize that we're in quite different time zones as we speak now. However, it's been groundbreaking in terms of making sure that you get the right brains on the call, the right opinions, and really, you know, once upon a time we'd do meetings. And, you know, this girl was unavailable. She worked nights, or, you know, you'd have a night shift in the day, guys. So to truly have people multiply working in different breakout rooms, the possibilities really are endless. And I think we're only scratching the surface on what can be done with this sort of conferencing at a farm. And I think a hybrid, to echo Mathieu's sentiment, he much prefers the face-to-face in-person thing. But, you know, a lot of projects we do take place over 6 months, right? So this, you know, you don't have the luxury to be sat with a customer for 6 months. So doing the, you know, multiple chats, you know, and just having little breakout sessions online gives you so much traction to get things done, to clarify, ask questions, and just work with people and gain that rapport, so that when you do meet in person, you've already feel like you've known that person for months, you know, which usually, you know, pre-pandemic, I don't think we quite had that done to a T like we do today. So I think, yeah, we're getting there, and there's a lot more to come.
You know, you brought up that global perspective, and I think that's really interesting. And now I want to get on a topic really quickly here. Let's go with Mathieu, otherwise known as Matt 1, not Matt 2. Mathieu, what do you think about the global perspective here? You and your team, you're over Australia, New Zealand area. How does that shape how you think? Do you think that a customer over in the USA has the same issues as you, or are they related much closer than we think? How does where you're sitting change how you think?
Yeah, it's constantly referenced. I think us being at the tail end of the world and more than Australia, a little bit behind Australia in regards to particularly some automation, some innovation, and technology in general in our supply chain. We often look to what are the Australians doing first. And we quite often go to Australia, visit sites that we've built with TMX, or jobs that the team over there have done, to understand what they've done and how it's relevant to our clients here in New Zealand. And we've also had clients, just one that I'm working on recently has got back from a trip in the US and the UK, going around multiple retailers over there to see how they operate and to see what they've done in their, in this instance, in their distribution centres. So for us, we're quite often looking to others for somebody who's done it first, because often we're not that first person to do it in New Zealand. So sometimes we are in some instances, but by and large, the UK and the US seem to kind of pave the way, and I think vendors focus a lot more on those markets, and by the time they come to us in New Zealand, they also have the perspective and from our teams elsewhere in the world at TMX, they have the perspective of, okay, we've done this elsewhere, we've done it before, we've done it many times, how can we apply it in the New Zealand market? But there are nuances to our market and the geography, particularly of our two islands, that make us a little different to the rest of the world. So that needs to be considered when we apply a global solution to a New Zealand context.
Well, Jamie, that's a lot of pressure. You have all these New Zealanders breathing down your neck, waiting for you to innovate so they can make the next move. How does it impact how you think about the global supply chain and innovation?
Well, I mean, it's a great question, and as Matthew would know, we're very close with our New Zealand cousins from an Australian perspective. But I mean, like to some extent, logistics principles are going to remain the same anywhere globally. So I think there's a great opportunity, and I think Mathieu and Neil mentioned it, is from a global perspective, we've all got to be collaborating and sharing ideas and trying to be innovative and trying to be cutting edge and learning from each other. I see in different markets around the world where there's a different level of maturity, let's say, and we all need to be sort of working together to give that great customer experience, because I think that's really what we all want to drive towards. And I've got a slightly different view to Matthew in some respects, just from looking and listening and learning from our colleagues in New Zealand and other parts of the world, because they're in a smaller environment. I think it's almost like that head office mentality, that when we're away from the head office, you're forced to be sometimes more innovative. Mm-hmm. So that would be my perspective. Like I see some of the smaller markets where innovation and the ideas that are coming back are sometimes really groundbreaking. And back to Neil's point, I mean, if you're building a candle, it's got to be something that's a fantastic idea. Well, what about if we could do it this way? Because we're forced in a position where things could be more challenging from a supply chain or logistics perspective. So lower population, or there's you've got to cut between two islands, or you've got to use a combination of road freight and rail freight and sea freight and all these sorts of things. So it's just a melting pot. I mean, it's fantastic that we have the opportunity to share our ideas and learn from others globally. And we see what's going on in the UK and Europe and some of the challenges as well that's happening in that part of the world. And we see that, from a USA perspective, it's almost exactly the same size geographically as Australia, but we've got 25 million people, and I think you've got 300 million people. So how do you then react to what your customer needs are in order to get that best customer experience is a great topic.
Interesting. Matt, too, would you agree with that a lot of the innovation that we can find is happening in the corners?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess each specific context will lead to innovation, and hearing what Jamie and Matthew were saying is really interesting, whereas it has to drive their context needs to drive innovation in a certain way where it won't happen the same way in Europe, whereas everything is close by. So it's a very interesting point, and for sure the context of the US and Canada being so close by but being also so big leads to different ways to deal with logistic problems, and a very interesting point. Yes.
Interesting. Okay, so Neil, let me ask you this. There's a lot of solutions out there. There's a lot of tech out there. There's a lot of innovation. There's a lack of innovation in some places. How is someone even supposed to make a buying decision in markets like these?
It's a really good question, because I think there are lots of options out there for your business. But I think for me, and it sounds like a bit of a sort of cliche or an old thing, but quality lasts, right? Buy cheap, buy twice. A lot of the time you'll see people that are drawn into an option because they want to just test the water, and they want to see if a solution could, fill a gap until they get the right solution. And I find that a lot of the time spent doing that, you'll waste time, you'll waste resource, you won't get the buy-in from your team, because their reflection of what technology is like. It's maybe it's just kind of what I used to do manually, but it's now in a different way. It's viewed on an app or something. So for me, and from what I found when I used to be in industry, is really search for that quality, because the quality will be the thing to give you those huge steps. It's going to maybe give you stuff that you weren't even looking for. So, to solve a few pain points and then realize and shed light on others that you were, oh my God, I had massive sort of elements here that I didn't even know were a problem that now this cool system with cool KPIs and metrics is going to shine light on. So I think that quality element is great, but also I would urge anybody that's in the buying process or even in the research process is to speak to customers or, you know, similar businesses to themselves of the guys that you're talking to. Don't take the salesman's word for it, because, you know, you can get some great salespeople out there that can promise the world, but find out, you know, what's the pulse of the industry or of that, you know, the customer that's using it at the moment. What's it done for them? What's the user experience? What was the project like? You know, did you have a great feedback from their team? You know, support. It's all great to have a system that is delivered and the guys walk away and say, great, fellas and ladies, enjoy the product. And then you want to call someone to change something, or it doesn't work as you planned. And, you know, you're speaking to a call center and you're having to explain to them who you are and what your business is. You know, so those things I think you get with quality vendors. You know, if it's from a consulting perspective, do they have a track record? You know, are these guys bona fide? And I think you'll find that from their client base, because a lot of the time the clients keep the best, you know, suppliers and services on a loop. You know, they grow with the business. They continue to use them. You know, this is like, we go back to the original conversation about relationships. They have to be the strong relationships, the relationships that last for generations, not just for a couple of years until your head's turned by something else that seems interested. So, you know, to answer your question, Dooner, you know, you get what you pay for, I think, and quality will always, the cream will always rise to the top, right? You know, the best products and solutions tend to be around for a while. They constantly change, and, you know, they're usually visible to you know, the people that are experts in that field. So talk to those guys.
But Jamie, you know, in a lot of places, market uncertainty makes it very easy for these conversations to come up in the room. You know, global inflation is off the charts. Maybe we'll all get furloughed. I don't know. Now it's not the time, et cetera, et cetera. How do you make those decisions when you're sort of in a climate like we're in right now?
It's a great question. I mean, the world is now, you know, facing a new challenge around, you know, financial metrics that we're all facing, you know, globally. We've got clients, you know, in the UK where there's extreme challenges. We've got clients in the US and across Asia Pacific where there's different challenges combined. It's all the more reason to be innovative. It's all the more reason, I think, to really delve into deep about how you can optimize your solution to be more competitive, to offering a solution that's going to be, you know, more attractive for your customers versus somebody else. I mean, the age of supply chain disruption is also upon us. And I was interested to hear you say, Dooner, about that whole bullwhip effect, which is now really starting to play through in this part of the world, in Australia and New Zealand. I think, you know, it was just sort of this sort of just-in-time inventory for a while, then it became just-in-case inventory for a period of time. And in this part of the world, a lot of our clients rely very, very heavily on imports from other parts of the world, you know, specifically Asia Pacific. And, you know, now we're getting to this stage where, well, folks have got the wrong inventory or too much inventory. So it's about, if you've got systems and processes and people that can be innovative and can really peel back the onion on what's going on here, you're in a position to really disrupt your competition from a supply chain perspective. So again, that would be my point. Supply chain is first and foremost, you know, in the thinking. And from a consultancy perspective, I think it's really important for us that we've got a lot of folks that are from industry. You know, we've been there, we've done that, we've got our hands dirty. We really understand the challenges that are going on. So then we can ensure that, you know, from a global perspective, you know, everybody is becoming more innovative, and you know, that's really critical at this time in the world. It's the challenge is upon us for sure.
It's a different time too. You didn't used to not hear about supply chain in every single earnings call, and it's not like we just had one quarter of this. We've had this go on almost perpetually since the start of the pandemic. It's been at one end or the other. Either there's too much inventory or not enough. So then let me ask you something, Neil. What is the cost of inaction? What if we do nothing?
Well, it's huge, I think. And again, similar to echoing Jamie again, is that you got to think about the landscape of the competition. So, you might think you're saving money with inaction, or you're not risking something by not investing in a product or some services. But trust me, your competition is, and if you want to lower the cost of something you're selling, you want to be more productive, when you want to optimize something, or just be leaner and meaner and more effective in your sort of marketplace, then you need to innovate. Now, whether that's in your processes, whether innovation it should be seen as something across the board, right? And we've had to do it during the pandemic. We've been forced into a position, right? And just because these things seem to be maybe getting back to somewhere normal, there is still a level where many businesses have had their innovation roadmaps condensed, and therefore they've accelerated at a really fast pace, but not everybody has. So if you want to be competitive and you want to still kind of be head to head in those marketplaces where you can offer, whether it's a low cost, a high end, something in between, you're a diverse business, you have to make the effort to really understand what's out there and what's best, because the guys who don't innovate, the businesses that don't innovate are being left behind today. You just don't tend to know about it until it's too late often. So that would be my message is it's not a case of should I innovate, should I invest? It's a case of you need to go and find out what's the best route for you and your business.
Well, I agree. I mean, think of how odd this conversation would be if we framed it in the sense of, should I not innovate, right? And that's the whole thing. Like, don't just stay the same, never change, especially in a dynamic world like freight. Matthew, before we wrap this thing up, what would you have to say about that? What would you have to say to the people in the company who want to innovate, who want to drive that forward, but are maybe afraid they don't know how, or they need that extra encouragement?
Yeah, look, I think if there's a case for it, and if there's a burning platform often helps to demonstrate if something's holding you back in your current role, or if something's holding your team back in terms of we're doing too much manual processing at the dock, or we're struggling with a certain element of the warehouse process. Maybe the system's not working the way it should in terms of drawing down replans. We're getting the wrong sequence. We're pulling from inoptimal locations, etc. It could be anything. If you can demonstrate that it's painful for you and demonstrate that it's will be beneficial to fix, and then you have a good leg to stand on. And the better you can demonstrate the burning platform, often the more you'll be heard, and the more incentive the company will have to fix something. Because I mean, today's world is so fraught with all sorts of challenges, and with all of the disruptions through COVID, it's always been the burning items that will get the priority. And I find if you can demonstrate the improvement that can be made from fixing something that is currently causing you some pain, then often you can kind of push that through, as long as there's enough support around the business and enough people who have the ability all the time, or can get somebody in to help with it.
I agree 100%. There's been more awareness about supply chain than ever, especially at a corporate C-suite level. If you want to make a big impact internally at a company, in my opinion, supply chain is one of the best attack vectors if you're looking to improve a company, improve your own company, or improve a client. There's so much waste in this industry that we can attack and target through smart innovation. I hope we've inspired some of those dreamers and those innovators. If they want to work with your team, Jamie, who should I send them to talk to? Who should they follow up with?
Well, as we know, we work for TMX, so we'd love to hear from the folks if they want to talk about their freight and logistics operations from a tech perspective, but also from a people and process and strategic perspective. I think the point around innovation is critical. It's you hear this saying, innovate or die. So if folks aren't looking to innovate, they're not going to have that business in the long term. Sustainability is critical as well. We've got a responsibility to the environment to, I think, really improve our supply chain operations. That's probably a topic we haven't covered in detail today, but that's really, really important for TMX as a business in terms of being consultants. And then I think it just also comes back to return on investment, which Mathieu touched on, that our clients are really looking for that return on investment. And from a consultancy perspective, we're able to help our clients understand what that return on investment can generate, and then look at that, getting that greater customer experience for their customers as well.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, so Neil, for those who chose innovate instead of die, why should they reach out to C3?
Well, again, I think this is always been a core sort of cornerstone of what we do. You know, we've been 22 years in the industry, and I think the one of the many powers of our business and our products are based on the innovations that have come from industry, ideas, you know, challenges, feedback that we've had from our client base, and just how we've seen the future pan out as you know, as it's changed. So, you know, don't take my word for it. C3solutions.com. There's some cool resources on there, case studies, information, you know, just give you a little bit of an idea about, you know, your particular industry, you know, the pain points that you might have suffered from or thinking, you know, you want to fix, you know, and like I say, ask around. I think it's really cool to understand from, you know, other industries, you know, who uses what technology, what consultants, what services, you know, because I think, and don't just stick it to your industry just because you're a grocer. There's some great stuff to be learned from pharmaceuticals or automotive manufacturing. You know, I think this goes back to the old idea of we live in a global world with solutions, and necessity is the mother of invention, right? You know, sometimes until you face that challenge and until you understand that you've got a particular set of constraints, you won't look in a certain direction to innovate. So, you know, do research. There's a lot online now that maybe there wasn't before, that, you know, just the power of search engines and stuff like that are, you know, is key. You know, and I think that when you want to do something, do it with all your sort of mind and heart. Believe in it, and you know, it will be hard work, but like Jamie just mentioned, ROI, the rewards are huge. You know, not just in removing of headaches, keeping happy, you know, customers happy, but you know, return on investment, dollars and cents, pounds and pence. You know, big things can happen if you innovate, and you know, I think it just makes your teams, you know, and all your employees and customers' world a happier place when they don't have to deal with manual sort of painstaking, error-prone tasks, you know, which is where we all want to go. It's why we all have smartphones and drive cars with full technology now, because those things are things of the past that we shouldn't have to deal with, right?
I agree completely. Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful panel. Thank you, C3 Solutions, for assembling this super group of minds to talk innovation. Thank you to this lovely audience for all of your questions and for joining us in attendance here. If we did not get to them, we will email you those answers. On behalf of our great panel and C3 Solutions, this has been Dooner. Go out there and dream and make it happen.